Welcome back. In this lecture, we'll try to understand and we'll shift our analysis to paper 2. We'll start with paper 2. We are almost done with theories of paper 1, right? Almost done because IPT is there and democracy is still remaining from paper 1. But we will start with theories of paper 2. We'll try to finish theories of paper 2 as soon as possible. The first the first topic of paper 2 is comparative politics. In paper 1, we were we were analyzing position of individual within state. In paper 1, we were analyzing working of state, right? Working of a particular state and working of state within itself. In paper 2, how our whole analysis will change, and it will be mostly limited to how a particular state reacts and acts with outside other states. And to start this analysis, to start the study of state with respect to another state, we'll start with comparing those states, right? What comparative politics is basically is, it is comparison between two sovereign states, right? On what basis comparison is going to happen? It is going to be happen on the basis of which kind of government is there, which kind of institution is there, right? We are going to compare governments, institutions. We can compare politics of two states. We can compare policies of two states as well. How government of two states function, how constitutions of two states is there. We can analyze and compare two states in multiple dimensions, right? So comparison and comparative politics. What is comparison? Comparison comparison is a method. When you see method, go back to behavioralism, go back to post behavioralism. The method word should ring bells in your mind, that comparative politics came after behavioralism, because method and methodological revolution came after behavioralism. So comparison is a method which tries to understand differences and similarities between two states, right? To give you example of comparison as a method, I will go back to Aristotle. For example, Aristotle. When we when we understand Aristotle's theory of constitutions, whereby Aristotle whereby Aristotle theory of revolution, not constitution but theory of revolution. In theory of revolution, he studied 158 constitutions, and by doing comparative analysis of 158 constitutions, he understood that polity is the best kind of system, right? This is comparative analysis. This is comparative analysis. You try to understand the better of the lot, the differences, the similarities between two systems, between multiple systems, by comparing them. Like Aristotle did by comparing 158 constitutions, he came to the conclusion that polity is least prone to revolution. And as Aristotle used comparative method for the first time, he is also known as father of comparative politics. This comparative method It is a primary method of biology. And Aristotle was son of physician. His father's name was Nicomacheus. Nicomacheus. He even wrote a book on his father, on name of his father, Nicomachean Ethics. Right. So Aristotle is son of physician, and by virtue of being son of physician, he develops a method based on biology or biological method, which is comparison, and he develops a theory on basis of that, on basis of comparison. He compares 158 constitutions and get to the conclusion that the best kind of system is polity, which is least prone to revolution, which is least prone to revolution. So what we have to understand that how comparative politics is, or what comparative politics is, how comparative, not comparative, how comparative politics, how comparative politics evolved, how comparative politics evolved, right? First, first we will understand traditional comparative politics. Traditional comparative politics. What is traditional comparative politics? It is Aristotle, right? It is Aristotle. Aristotle, Aristotle gave his theory of comparative politics, or gave his theory of revolution with basis of comparative method. This traditional comparative politics had some limitations, had some limitations, right? Other exponent of traditional comparative politics are Jean Baudin. There is Montesquieu as well. There is Rousseau as well. Why they are exponent of comparative politics? I will have to explain each one of them and how they compared one state to another. But for now, you just have to understand that from 80 to Rousseau, from Aristotle to Rousseau, they compared a particular state to another state to get to a better idea of state, or to justify their theories and all. Right? Traditional comparative politics. Right? Traditional comparative politics had a lot of limitations. Right? What is traditional comparative politics? It will be clear when we understand the limitations. Right? What is traditional comparative politics? We'll understand by its limitations. What are the limitations of traditional comparative politics? The first limitation of traditional comparative politics, that it was static. It was static. What does it mean by static? Right? What does it mean by static? By static, it means that it studied text, not context. It studied constitutions, not the actors who apply constitutions. It studied law, not application of law. Right? It studied theory. Right? It studied theory, not application. This is first limitation, that it was static, it was textual, it was constitutional, it was legal, it was theoretical. Right? As you can see, Aristotle compared 158 constitutions, not the context. He understood 158 constitutions, not the contexts. So it was static. It was analyzing, it was comparing static textual things. This is the first limitation. It was analyzing static, legal, constitutional contextual things. It was not taking into account the context, right? The second limitation is the second limitation is it is based on value preferences. It is based on value preferences, right? We are trying to understand limitation of traditional comparative politics, whereby first limitation is it was static. Second limitation is it was based on value preferences. That is, it was based on biases. Biases. What does it mean? What does it mean? That I will compare a lot of things, but I will only validate those things which I originally are which I am originally with. Right? I have a particular bias, and I will do comparison in a such a way that whereby my bias get justified. Right? For example, there is Aristotle who likes polity, and in his theory of revolution, in his theory of revolution, he gives justification of polity so as to why polity is most stable, most least prone to revolution, right? But he analyzed only 158 constitutions. What if he analyzed 200 constitutions, and the rest 42 constitution which he analyzed gives in support of philosopher king and authoritarian state, that they justify that authoritarian state and philosopher king is a better system. But Aristotle had a inherent biases which he wants to justify, right? That is why it is prone to value preferences. It is prone to value preferences. Whatever your values are, you will try to justify. You will try to justify your point, right? That it is prone to biases. The third point is the third limitation is that traditional comparative politics was essentially non-comparative. Traditional comparative politics was essentially non-comparative. What does this mean? This means that traditional comparative politics was parochial. What does parochial mean? That it was local. It was localized. It was localized. Right? What does parochial mean? That traditional comparative politics was comparing similar states. Was comparing similar states. Was comparing states with similar social structure. Traditional comparative politics was comparing similar states and comparing states with similar social structure. Right? For example, if you compare societies and states of UK and US, which society or which state is better, or which there are not many differences and similarities between UK. There are a lot of similarities but not much differences between UK and US. If you compare UK and US, your research outcome will not be analytically rich. If you compare UK or and Pakistan, there are so much differences between UK and Pakistan that your research outcome will be analytically richer. That you have much better research if you compare two entities which are entirely different. right? Therefore, therefore, we can understand and why it was parochial because it was limited to Europe and Western societies. That is why it was Eurocentric. Traditional CP was limited to Europe. It was parochial to Europe. That is why it was Eurocentric. So, what are the limitations of traditional comparative politics? That it was static. It was it was there. It was based on personal value preferences. It was based on biases, and it was essentially non-comparative. Why it was non-comparative? Because it was comparing states of Europe which were very similar. When you compare very similar states, the output is not that good, right? When you compare two very different states, you can understand and you have better analytical output. True. So that is traditional comparative politics. We have to and and traditional comparative politics was essentially non-comparative. It was Eurocentric. When after World War II, a lot of states got independent. There was a lot of states which got independence, and post-colonial states got formed. When post-colonial state got formed, comparative politics became more important because comparative politics became more important because there were different states which needs to be studied. So the second phase started after World War II, right? Second phase started after World War II, and most of the comparative studies was done by American American school scholars, right? Comparative politics is American discipline. International relations is also American discipline. And why Americans thought we should understand or we should do comparative studies? Because World War II finished, just happened. World War II led to decolonization around the world. World War II led to decolonization. When decolonization happened, there were a lot of non-Western countries which needed to be studied, which needed to be studied, right? So, what Americans wanted to do was to study these countries, to study non-Western societies, and what they wanted to do. Basically, what Americans wanted to do to establish their hegemony on these non-Western societies, right? Non-Western countries need to be studied so that US can establish its hegemony, right? US can establish its hegemony. In American school, many approaches emerged, of which we have actually studied some. In theory of state, post political modernization approach of Lucian Pye we have studied. What political modernization approach suggests that we should go for democracy. Democracy will lead to betterment of societies. Then there was political development. Political development scholars like Kenneth Organsky, Fukuyama suggests that we should go for not Fukuyama, Huntington. Political development scholars suggest that we should go for economic modernization. If we go for economic modernization, democracy will arrive automatically. So these two perspectives which we have studied in post-colonial theory of state, these are out of comparative politics, and these are American approaches, whereby America wanted to say that go to democracy or go to economic development so that your position will be better. But what Americans were trying to do was establish their hegemony and aligning different countries with their foreign policy, right? There is another school which is known as dependency school. Dependency school we have studied in post-colonial theory of state, right? Dependency school. There we studied Samir Amin. There we studied Samir Amin. There we studied A.G. Frank. A.G. Frank and his theory of underdevelopment, development of underdevelopment. Right. Emmanuel Wallerstein we are going to study. So these scholars gave dependency school or third world perspective of comparative politics. American school scholars were like political modernization, political development, and third world perspective was given by Samir Amin, A.G. Frank, Emmanuel Wallerstein. What we are trying to understand that how comparative politics evolved from traditional to post World War. American school is one type, and developmental dependency school is another type. So this was evolution of political science, evolution of comparative politics, evolution of comparative politics, right? What is comparative politics that we have seen that it is basically out of comparative method. What is comparative method? It is basically comparing one country to another with respect to different parameters like government, policies, politics, etc., etc., etc. Right? And that is only comparative method. Only one thing which remains with respect to comparative politics and which is extension of dependency school, and it is one of the criticism of comparative politics, that is Eurocentrism. In comparative politics we have studied in post-colonial theory of state, Orientalism we have studied, right? What is Eurocentrism? What is Eurocentrism? It is basically hegemony of Western world, hegemony of Western world in academics. Academics. Eurocentrism, it is not hegemony in real world, it is in academics. Never forget this. Right? It is in academics. What does it mean by this? What does it mean by this? It means to say that in academics, there has been attempt to write theories and perspective for post-colonial world, third world, which is not which is which is for for hegemony of West, right? Which is for hegemony of West. Everything that was written in academics was with respect to the Western scholars. What post-colonial theory, what Orientalism basically wanted to do was to bring equity in academics, right? Forget about real world when you are trying to study comparative politics. Always think and always try to understand that what what I will say or whatever you are going to read, it is with respect to academic. It is with respect to academic. So what is Eurocentrism? It is basically hegemony of Western world in academics, not in real world. And against Eurocentrism, Samir Amin gives his idea. Edward said, not Samir Amin. Edward said gives his idea of Orientalism. Eurocentrism is an idea given by Samir Amin. Orientalism, it is a similar idea to Eurocentrism. Both of which want to say that Orientalism was given by Edward Said and Eurocentrism was given by Samir Amin. Both of which want to say that third world, third world is or academics of third world is hegemonized by Western world. That stories of third world are written by history and stories of third world, policies of third world are written by Western academicians as project of West. What are the basic concepts of Eurocentrism? Basic concepts of Eurocentrism. The first concept is of otherness. Otherness. Otherness means otherness means that East and West are seen as two dichotomous, two binary entities. East and West are seen in binaries. They are dichotomous, right? Otherness. East is seen as other, West is seen as primary, right? Try to connect it to the second sex of Simone de Beauvoir. East is seen as secondary and West is seen as primary, right? The concept of otherness. What are the basic concept of Eurocentrism? Otherness. Eurocentrism, as given by Samir Amin, which is he defines Eurocentrism as hegemony of West on East. Concept of otherness. The second concept is of Darwinism. In Darwinism, in Darwinism, the first concept is evolutionism, which basically wants to say that West is more developed than East. West is more developed than East. So to develop, we should follow trajectory of West. We should go towards democracy. Then the second concept is survival of fittest. Survival of the fittest. Right? What is survival of the fittest? He wants to say that he wants to say that normative judgment is predetermined. Means East is secondary, it is predetermined. Fitter is West, that is why it will survive, and East is secondary. Right? East is secondary. Right? Why Eurocentrism as a concept? Eurocentrism as a concept, and why academic pushback is needed from East? Because of globalization. Globalization has led to overlap between comparative politics and international politics, right? So states will be compared and state will be analyzed so that West can establish its hegemony on East. Non-West can be portrayed as other. So Eurocentrism is like limiting factor on East, and that is why it needs to be curbed. It needs to be limited. That is the idea. That is the idea behind comparative politics. We have seen two approaches within comparative politics, and we have seen limitation of comparative politics, which is Eurocentrism. That is the idea. And from the next lecture, we'll start with systems approach of David Distance. Thank you so much. Bye.